Welcome to Living Chassidus. Together, let's live the Chassidus we learn.
Awesome. Okay, welcome everybody. Our winners for today's prize here in the sukkah are Ariela Zuckerman, Fig Ishbay, Sima Deshevsky, Hannah Sampaya Lal, Shelby Aronson, Hila Diaz, Rivka Mendelson, Khani Albuquerque, Chava Bouchard, Stebbins, Michelle Miller, Chaya Matasaf, Shalamis K, and Yosefa Wood Eisenberg. And if you haven't yet told me that you've earned it, please do so. And again, for recording this, here is the umbrella. This is the gift for today. Let the rough bring down, and you can come claim it if you earned your prize. Ask me about sales after. Now, I will move out of the incredible seat because we have the great source of having Rabbi Glick for the first time not be our kickoff rabbi, but he is our Sukkos rabbi. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So just a technicality, a halachic technicality. Well, it's a bit too much right there. I don't want to mess up the audio.
I need to actually look at that. Yeah.
Because we're sitting in a sukkah, you actually say leishav sukkah even if you're not eating, if you're hanging out and spending time in the sukkah. It's ideal to eat a kabeya is to say the revelation of sukkah, but if you know, for whatever reason, I'm not going to do that. If we're sitting and hanging out, you should still be saying sukkah. So it's a frequently overlooked halacha. So
when do you say it? Just when you decide that you're
as soon as you know that you're going to be sitting settled. Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm going to start by talking about sukkahs. It's still sukkahs. We still got, a day almost of sukkahs left. And really the conversation about sukkahs, first of all, it's a super important idea. And even one day of this clarity and focus is well worth it because it's an incredibly powerful thing to be aware of. And it's also going to lead us into Simchas Torah as well. It's not random that Simchas Torah Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah follows Sukkos immediately. So whatever it is that's the theme of Sukkos, it makes sense that it's likely that that's going to feed into the theme of Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah because it's a real thing. So, as everyone here presumably is well aware, we have a big celebration right around the corner, Simchas Beis HaShe'eva. Now, Chazal say that anyone who didn't see Simchas Beis HaShe'eva has never seen true joy. Right, and the Gemara describes what happened in Simchas Beis HaShe'eva. The Talmidei Chachamim danced all night, and they would dance half asleep with their head resting on the shoulders of the person in front of them because they danced all night, every night throughout the whole sukkah, and they just got really tired. So what's this this celebration? There's something about, and what's Simchas Beis HaShe'eva? What does Beis HaShe'eva mean? She'eva literally means she'eva means drawing. It's the drawing of the water. For what? So in the Beis HaMikdash every day, when a carbon was brought, generally any carbon generally was accompanied by a mincha, which is a meal offering, flour and some oil mixed in, and a nesachim. Nesach means a pouring offering, and that was pouring of wine. So nisuch hayayim, pouring of wine, happened every day in the Beis HaMikdash. So it was just part of the routines. There was pouring of wine was happening all day, every day. Now, on Sukkos, there was an additional libation. It's called pouring sacrifice. They would pour water. Nisuch hamayim. The only time water was poured in the Beis HaMikdash on the Mizbeach was Sukkos. And it was like a whole thing in the corner at the base of the Mizbeach. There were two holes, like drainage holes, where they would pour the these liquid sacrifices, the libations, I think the word is. And because wine is a little bit more viscous than water, so the hole that the wine went down was a little bit larger than the hole the water went down, because they were supposed to go down at the same pace. I don't know if I just mixed those up. Wine is more viscous, so the wine hole was a little bit larger than water. Anyways, and for some, so in order to pour the water, they had to draw the water. So they would draw the water in the evening, at a ceremony of drawing the water, getting it ready to pour the next day. And for some reason, there's something about the drawing of this water that is the greatest source of joy, and was celebrated with all the Talmidei Chachamim and the big rabbis dancing all night, every night for a week, falling asleep on top of each other, literally as they were dancing. And if you didn't see the celebration of the drawing of the water, you never saw joy. Clearly, there's something more to this than water, because there were lots of sacrifices, lots of korbanos in the Mizbeach, and there was pouring of wine every day, and all of that's just like, oh, whatever. For some reason, the drawing of the water is the greatest celebration, that is the greatest joy. And if you haven't seen that, it's like basically saying the celebration, Simchas Beis, that celebration was in a category of its own. All other celebrations on planet Earth are in one category. The celebration of Simchas Beis is in a separate category. So if you've seen all other sources of joy except Simchas Beis, you haven't seen true joy. You've only seen the lower tier of joy. Tier 1 joy, there's only one thing that brings that Simchas Beis. There's going to be something going on. Because there are a lot of things in life that are very joyous, and for some reason, none of them compared to the celebrating of the drawing of the water to pour on this day out. I mean, it's nice. It's, serving Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash. There's lots of serving Hashem in the Beis Hamikdash. Why is this the thing that is in its own category and it has its own tier of joy? There obviously is a lot going on here that we need to understand. And really, the water is a very, very strong metaphor for something, a mashal. Sure. The water was the water that they would draw from the spring or well to have it ready to pour on the Mizbeach the next day, in this ceremony of pouring the water. That was the whole thing. And for some reason, the drawing of that water is in a separate category of joy to weddings and births and all the other korbanos and the pouring of the wine and all the mitzvahs and all the everything. For some reason, this is like the thing, the water. So water is going to be a very strong metaphor for something. And we're going to figure out what that is. So, there are a lot of things that are true about water, and there are two things that are kind of opposite. And the fact that these two opposites tend to go together, and water is the epitome of these two opposites to the greatest extreme that exists. So right now, that probably doesn't mean anything, but hopefully it will mean a lot more than just something shortly. It's supposed to be an hour, right? Till 9 o'clock? Okay. Otherwise, I'll go till 2. So on one hand, water is like the least exciting of all beverages, unless you're thirsty. But if you're not thirsty, you never, presumably, I mean, today maybe it's a thing, I wouldn't be surprised, but you don't generally like give someone a call and say, hey, do you want to go out for water? Right? You might go out for coffee, you might go out for a glass of wine, you might go out for all kinds of things, but usually not water. And there's a reason, and that's because water doesn't really give you much sensory input. There's no source of sensory pleasure. It's got no flavor, hopefully. It's got no color, hopefully. It got no much texture. There's no fizz. It's not carbonated. It's the least interesting, the least exciting, and the least dramatic of all drinks. As opposed to the wine, there were two beverages, or liquids that could be beverages that were poured on the Mizbeach. One was wine. And wine's at the opposite end of the spectrum. Wine is that drink that when you want a meal to become very formal and you want to give status to the meal, you bring out a nice bottle of wine. And it's not just a social thing, it's extended that the social role and status that wine plays and has for millennia is something that's important, and it's acknowledged and utilized by halacha, right? At a wedding, at a sudas mitzvah, all of these opportunities, Kiddush on Shabbos, Yom Tov, we use wine because wine is something that has importance, it has status, it has prominence. So it's a thing that, if that's at the center of a ceremony, of a process, that brings a sense of prominence and status to it in terms of our experience, which is why halacha says that we should use wine for all these things. Now, whilst on one hand, wine is, I mean, all you have to do is look at the label on a wine bottle and see how carried away the marketing people got when they wrote the description of the bouquet and the fruits and the berries and the pepper and the chocolate and the things that are top notes, bottom notes, the middle, and the front palate, the back palate, etc., etc. The amount of things that go into officially the experience, the sensory experience of wine, and smelling it first, swishing around the glass and watching the legs and all the things that you do with wine. Wine as a drink is probably the ultimate sensory experience that you can get from a beverage. Water is the opposite extreme. Water has nothing sensory about it. There's no sensory input. And for some reason, it's the water without the sensory input that's the thing that's the source of greatest joy. The thing that's tasty and has all these sources of sensory input and pleasure would be the greatest source of joy. And when it comes to water, again, this same idea is seen in halacha. Again, if the halacha is, before you consume anything edible, any sort of food or drink, you make a bracha. Any amount, tiny nibble, you eat a crumb of any food, you have to make a bracha before. You have a sip, you touch a drink to your lip, if a tiny drop of it goes into your mouth, you have to make a bracha before. For brachas afterwards, there are amounts, and you have to eat this amount at this amount of time, and it's all very complicated. But when it comes to the bracha before, you're not allowed to put anything in your mouth without making a bracha before. It's one exception. That exception is water if you're not thirsty. And so the reason is what we just discussed. You know, if let's say someone's taking medication and the instruction medication says, say, take once daily in the morning with a glass of orange juice, because this medication is absorbed more effectively if it's in a more acidic environment, even though I doubt orange juice is going to make your stomach more acidic than it already is, whatever it is, right? Take it with a glass of milk for this reason, or with whatever it is, eat with some solids. Any of those things you have to make a bracha before. Thirsty or not thirsty, when you drink orange juice, it has flavor, it's sweet. There is a sensory experience when you drink orange juice, any beverage other than water. There is sensory pleasure involved in eating any food, assuming that it's good food. So if you're eating food, you make a bracha before, regardless of how interested you are or not, because the bottom line is it's bringing you sensory, it's a source of sensory input and pleasure. You drink any liquid other than water, it's giving you, it's a source of flavor, it's a source of a sensory experience, you make a bracha. If you're drinking water only because the instruction said so, if the instruction said, take this pill in the morning with a glass of water, and you wake up in the morning and you're really not thirsty, and you're honestly not interested in a cup of water, you don't actually have to make a bracha on that water. It's not sweet, it's no flavor, no sensory input, aside from that physical feeling of the touch of the water going down your throat, which if you're thirsty is the best feeling in the world, which we'll get to, but if you're not, it's like, whatever, this is lame, this is water. So because water is lame in terms of its characteristics and its presentation and its sensory experience, so if you're not thirsty, you actually don't make a bracha on water. If you're drinking water and you're not thirsty, now, when we say not thirsty, that means you're drinking it because you've been instructed to for some reason. If you just feel like having a cup of water, I'm not super thirsty, but I want a cup of water. If you want a cup of water, that means you're thirsty, halachically. But if you've been instructed to drink it for another reason by a doctor or whatever it is, and you don't really want to, but you drink it because you have to, you don't make a bracha. And that's the only exception to the rule that nothing goes in the mouth without a bracha is water. And that's exactly why, because water's lame. That being said, if someone's stuck on a desert island and they get to choose one consumable item to have, and I had to adjust this because last time I said They could choose any one thing, and then maybe they would choose a genie, or I don't know. But one consumable thing to have on a desert island, if the person has any idea about life, they're going to choose that one thing to be water. You can live a while without food. You can live a while without everything other than water. And if a person has water, they'll drink the water, and maybe they'll have time to figure out a source of food, figure something out. Maybe they'll figure out a way to get away. But without water, we don't last very long at all. Water is the number one thing we have. The number one need we have to survive, to exist, to be alive is water. So if a person's thirsty, they'll give, if a person's like super thirsty, dehydrated, and in extreme circumstances where there's no water available, they'd give away everything else on planet Earth just to get hold of some water. Water is the number one most important thing in life. On the other hand, once we have enough water, a person who's not dehydrated and not thirsty is like, water, that's like super lame. There's nothing interesting about it. Depending on your taste, the person might want a cup of coffee, even if they're not thirsty, and even if they're not tired and they don't need the caffeine, because like they just enjoy drinking coffee. Person might want a glass of wine, even if they're not thirsty and whatever, just because they enjoy drinking wine or orange juice or Coca-Cola or you name it. And the same with food. I'm sure most people can relate to the possibility of being interested in eating food without being hungry. If you're not thirsty and there's a cup of water, most people are not going to be like, oh, that water is like really interesting. I'm not thirsty, but I'll drink it anyway. Right? It's not sweet. There's no flavor. So if we're not short on water, if our needs for water are met, then water is super lame. And it's so lame that you can drink it without even making a bracha if you're not thirsty. That being said, if our need for water is not met, it might quite literally be the end of, well, not the end of the world for everyone, but the end of the world for the person who doesn't have water quite quickly. So there's something in our lives that water is a mashal for. There's something in our lives that doesn't have appealing characteristics. It doesn't have exciting characteristics. It doesn't have drama. It doesn't have excitement. It's something that's very simple, very plain, very bland. That being said, if we don't have that thing, it's worse than missing out on everything else. Now, there are a couple of, if we're looking at the whole reality of everything as a picture, there are a few different layers of this picture where the water is a metaphor for different things. The one I want to talk about is what was the title of the talk. And so I was in the car driving with a bunch of kids, Kanai Nahara, who are very vocal and inquisitive at the time that I had to come up with the title. So it's pretty much right. Maybe there's a word, I don't know if the word love maybe could have had a better alternative, something a little bit more specific, but the title was, there's a right and a wrong way to love ourselves, right? Is that what it was? Whatever, it doesn't matter. That's the general idea, right? So that's the subtitle. Anyways, if it was WhatsApp, I could have done bold and then italics in text. You can't do that. So,
Yes, you guys
Baruch Hashem. So, right. So the mashal of water is the place that the mashal really starts is with Hashem, and then there's like the spheres and the different things, and then there's Atzmos. But the part I want to focus on is the equivalent in our experience, and it goes together. And I want to start from, it's something that I struggle with, not struggle with, but work on, and it's a difficult balance. I mean, these kinds of things, to get the perfect balance is effectively impossible. It's never going to happen, but we can work on adjusting the balance and getting better and better and easier and, tweaking it over time. But the balance between giving positive feedback, right? Positive feedback is a very, very, very important and powerful and effective mechanism for motivating people. It's powerful for you know, for parents to use with children, for educators to use with students, for employers to use for employees, and frankly, to use for peers, for friends, for people we care about, for ourselves, right? And that's because when we get, let's call it praised for something, when we get positive feedback, if someone tells you, you know, that was really good, like, you know, that thing you did over there, like, have a look at the outcome of what you did this and all of these things happened, and, you know, all of these benefits came out. That's, you know, already a very, I don't know how many of you noticed, but I was very careful about wording that, you know, as opposed to like, wow, good job, that was amazing, which is positive feedback. It's, you know, whatever. The bottom line is all of these things, when someone praises the fact that you did something well and emphasizes the positive outcomes that came of it, and what happens is it makes you feel good. It's like, oh, wow, that was good. So what happens? Think about what's happening, you know, up here physiologically in the brain, neurologically. What happens is when we get praised for something, we get a hit of dopamine, which feels good. It makes us feel rewarded, because that's the chemistry of reward is dopamine. So we get some dopamine, which makes us feel good. And then what happens is our brain subconsciously gets the message that when we do this and this thing, we end up getting dopamine. Now, the reason that we got the dopamine was because we got praised. But the brain's not so much interested in the praise as it is the dopamine that happens as a result. So what happens consciously is, oh, wow, I did this thing and someone's proud of me, which motivates us to do it again. What's happening behind the scenes is that when we feel like someone's proud of us, that feels good. It makes us feel that's rewarded, gives us positive emotion, which makes us want to do it again. So when we give positive feedback, when we comment and acknowledge something that someone did, and acknowledge, and the more specifically the better, the more in detail the better, what was good about it and the positive outcomes that came, the benefit that results from what they did, they feel good about it, it's going to make them want to do it again. And it's probably the most powerful, one of the most powerful motivators. It's a much more powerful motivator than punishment, generally, for a lot of reasons. So, you know, and on one hand, you could think of it as manipulation. It's like you want someone to do something, so you give them positive feedback for doing it, and you get them to do it again. And sometimes, you know, maybe it is. I'm guessing we can say as a statement of fact that there are many times around the world every day that positive reinforcement is used, positive feedback is used manipulatively. But it doesn't necessarily have to be, right? If you care about someone, whether it's a peer, a friend, and you know that they benefit from getting better at something, from improving a specific area, and you see that they put in some effort, and it doesn't have to be condescending and like, you know, like their parent or teacher, because that's not going to make them feel good. That's going to make them feel miserable and resentful. But if you can find a way to, you know, casually, classily, in a way that's going to make them feel good and not bad, just acknowledge what they did, point out so that they notice it, so that their brain notices, oh, I did this thing and this happened as a result. They notice that consciously, they become consciously aware of it, makes them feel good. That's going to actually increase their likelihood of being able to do that again. And as that happens and they get more and more positive feedback, it's going to help them do it more and more and more. Now, if you're doing this because you care about the person, you're not manipulating them. I mean, maybe you are, but you're manipulating them for their benefit. You're trying to help them, right? So, and many, probably most times, especially like a parent-child relationship and educator-student relationship, both go together, right? That when the parent is helping the child grow and advance and make the progress that's in the best interest of the child, it also happens to work out in the best interest of the parent. When a teacher is doing something that's in the best interest of the student effectively, it's also going to be in the best interest of the teacher. So some teachers and parents might be doing it, you know, because they're thinking about themselves. Some might be doing it because they're thinking about the student or the child. Either way, positive feedback doesn't necessarily have to be manipulative at all. You could be doing it for the person's own interest. And it's a very important thing. However, here's the fine print. I'm going to give an extreme case illustration. I mean, it's not that extreme, but like an extreme case illustration just to make the point. Imagine that someone grows up and from a young age, they're always told, wow, you did this so well. Look what happened. You worked hard and you got a good result on the test. And and that's going to, maybe you could stop there. You could say, well, talk about the opportunities this is going to open up in life. And every time someone does something well, you give positive feedback and you point it out and make sure they notice what they did and the benefits, and they're always getting that positive feedback. But the only time this person ever really gets positive input that makes them feel valued is when they've done something to earn that. What could end up happening is that person develops into an adult who is driven to a pathological degree to always have to achieve, always have to work hard, always have to do something, always have to make something happen, because that's where the only validation they ever got came from. And that can end up, so whilst positive reinforcement is a very positive thing, if that's the only place that a person's getting validation from, it can become very unhealthy and it can become quite dangerous. Sorry, yeah, a people pleaser, but even, there are going to be different varieties. It could be a people pleaser. It could be someone that for themselves, it's just like, I need to achieve, I need to make this happen because that's what makes me feel valid for myself. I need to make something happen. I need to feel like I'm making this happen. I need to feel like I'm achieving, like I'm doing things. And this person is just chasing that, chasing, and always feels a pathological need to be achieving and to be doing something, and never learnt that they are valid just because they exist and because of who they are, and that they can value themselves because of who they are, regardless, and that their existence is important and worthwhile just by virtue of the fact that they exist, regardless of what they do or don't do or don't achieve or how much effort they do or don't. If a person is missing that sense of security and clarity in the value that they have as an individual, regardless of everything else, then the positive feedback can become very dangerous because it just drives them, and they'll end up never feeling personally fulfilled, never feeling a sense of self-worth, never feeling a sense of being valid as an individual. They only feel valid as a result of the validating things that they're doing, and they're going to just be driven to do and do and do and do and do and do. And there's only so long a person can do that before they break down, before they become resentful, before they burn out. And on top of the resentment and the burnout and everything else, the person's just going to have a gaping hole in terms of how they feel about themselves. So just the positive feedback on achievements without the other side of the picture can become extremely dangerous, extremely unhealthy. The ideal picture is that a person, receives the message. And this message is not only important because it's important for our health and our well-being and our quality of life and our emotional stability. It's important because it's actually the truth. It's the objective truth. It's correct. It's empirically correct. I shouldn't say objective, but it's the empirical truth. That's reason number one. It just so happens that this empirical truth also is important for our well-being. And that is that we matter, period. And it's very simple. You can do very simple math, right? If we've learned the basics of Chassidus, the basics of Shaykhut Emunah, nothing exists without Hashem making it exist, specifically, individually, at this moment in time. There is no one in this room, and there's none of the 7.5, I don't know, what are we up to, 7.8 billion people, 7.5? Whatever it is, doesn't matter. Out of, let's say, the 7.5 billion people on planet Earth, there's not a single one of those people who doesn't individually need to be here the way that they are. Because if they didn't need to be, Hashem wouldn't be putting in the specific, uniquely designed creative force that makes that person exist. Every one of us is different. 7.5 billion people on planet Earth is 7.5 unique people. 7.5 billion different conscious experiences. 7.5 billion different brains. Even identical twins have differences. 7.5 billion different emotional makeups, emotional profiles. And once you have 7.5 billion different brains and minds multiplied by 7.5 billion different hearts, think about the number of variations that we have potentially. Every one of those unique individuals, by definition, needs to be created by their own divine creative force that makes them exist, which means Hashem is custom designing every single person and custom creating every single person into every moment in time. Otherwise, it wouldn't be there. So the simple math is, if someone is alive, they matter. They matter as far as Hashem is concerned. And that should be enough. And it just so happens, not only is it as far as Hashem is concerned, Hashem also is wrong, which means they matter, period. So if someone exists, they matter. And their existence is important and worthwhile and valid by virtue of the fact that they exist. Simple. And that's the empirical truth for every single person. Then on top of that, on top of the fact that in order for us to exist, Hashem needs to be proactively creating us and making us exist, which means, and custom design every individual, which means that if we exist, Hashem clearly believes that we need to exist. On top of that, every single one of us has inside of us a neshama, which is chelek elaka mima. Every one of us has Hashem, has absolute infinity inside of us, which means that every single one of us is absolutely, infinitely valuable, just by virtue of the fact that we exist. Yes, achievements, no achievements. Yes, effort, no effort. Now, as you know, we'll see, this is not saying that it's not important to work and to achieve and to make things happen. It is. But that's not the primary source of validity or value that we have. The primary source of validity and value that we have is, number one, the fact that Hashem is bothering to make us exist right now. That's not necessarily the source of the validity, but that's the evidence of the validity and the value. Because if we didn't have validity and value, Hashem wouldn't be bothering to make us exist. Hashem's got 7.4999999 billion other people to bother creating. If he's bothering to create us as well, that means that there's a reason and we need to be and be met. We have that value. On top of that, we also have absolute inside of us. So that value is there, that exists. And that's number one. And that needs to be the foundation. The foundation is we exist here, not because of how we think, and not because of how we feel, and not because of how uniquely capable we are, and not because of how gifted we are, and not because of the things that we've done, or the things that we could do, or the potential we have, or anything else. Because we exist. That's the most important, most powerful. That's the source of greatest value within us. Because within us is Hashem, and Hashem, the absolute infinity, is greater than everything we'll ever achieve. And again, it's not to take away from the value and importance of achievement, which is important and valuable for a whole range of reasons. But that's the house that's built on top of the foundation. Foundation that the house rests on, that keeps that house stable, is the fact that we are valuable. Period. End of statement. That is the sentence. The sentence is, I am valuable. Period. You are valuable. Every single one of us is valuable. End of statement. End of sentence. On top of that value that we have as an individual, which we have regardless of our abilities and our gifts and our strengths and our weaknesses and our achievements and our effort and everything else. On top of that, then there are the things in which we're all different, because as far as the fact that we have infinity inside of us, we're all the same. But then on top of that, there are the things that we have that are unique. We have different minds. We have, and variety of minds is a very important and valuable thing. If everybody was Einstein, we'd be missing out on most of the things that we have in the world. First of all, just in terms of discovery and development, certainly in terms of experience, right? There's no person whose mind and whose emotional profile doesn't make a positive contribution to the whole, to the sum of everybody. More variation is positive. That's why Hashem made it that way, and that's why every one of us is here and it is different, because that variation and variety is a positive. And the ultimate picture and the most wholesome, sense of, or the most wholesome approach to, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but the most wholesome perspective perhaps is going to be a combination of two. A person who is raised with an awareness, and not in a, in a narcissistic way, in a way that they have a true appreciation for the absolute infinity of Hashem and the honor and responsibility that come with having that inside of us. And again, there's the ground layer before that, which applies to everyone alive, which is empirically correct. And that is that if someone exists, Hashem is bothering to make them exist, which is evidence of the fact that as far as Hashem is concerned, they matter. That should be already enough. As far as Hashem's concerned, I need to be here. As far as Hashem's concerned, I'm enough exactly the way I am. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here the way that I am. Simple math. And if a person has clarity and security in that sense of, I am worthwhile and valuable and need to be here because I exist, because I'm here, because I have the absolute of infinity of Hashem inside of me. All of those things mean that I matter, I'm valuable, period. And then on top of that, on top of that clarity and awareness and security, on top of that, they then also get positive feedback that helps train them to put in effort, to break boundaries, to go out of their comfort zone, to make things happen, to make a difference, to achieve and to make things happen. A person who has both of those, who has the foundation and has the house built on top of it, that's a person whose life is going to be as meaningful as a life could possibly be. Right now, when it comes to our gifts, the things that we're good at, the challenges, the struggles, the places we put in effort, the achievements that we make, the difference we make, the things we make happen, all of those things they're colorful, there's variety, they're unique. Those things can start to have a lot of drama and a lot of excitement. Making things happen, doing things, we're capable, we're talented, unique. All of this is excitement and drama. It's flavor, it's color. There starts to be variation. Just like all the different foods and all the different flavored drinks, different colored drinks, there's variation and things start to get exciting, right? It's a lot more interesting to walk into a room, to sit down at a table where there's a variety of beverages, a variety of flavors and colors, and you walk in and there's just water. It's like, yeah, that's kind of lame in terms of the excitement. But which one's the one that's actually going to leave you best off? The water. So yes, it's not exciting. So so the achievements and the unique personality and the mind and the emotions and the talents and the gifts and all of these things, that's the colors, the textures, the different flavors. And there's drama and there's excitement. And if you have those things, it would make a bracha because they have unique sensory input. Everything's unique. Everything's going to be something specific and something positive. You mean like the positive reinforcement in terms of those things? 100% can and should. It's a very important thing, and it's something that there are a few people I've been talking to lately and really focusing on this. Is celebrating small wins for ourselves in our lives. It's so important because it really makes a difference. If there are things that we're working on, we're like, I need to get better at this, I need to get better at this, I need to get better at this, and all we think of is, I need to get better at this, I need to get better at this, it starts to become a bit of a drag. But if, as we go throughout our day, we're like, I need to work on this, I need to work on this, and then I am working on this, and it's like, you know what, whoa, hang on a second, like, I just did something that might seem like a tiny little thing, but 2 weeks ago, there's no chance that would have happened. And it's a tiny little thing, but that means I have made tangible progress in this journey. And acknowledging that and saying, wow, you know what? Yeah, we're making progress. That's a very important and validating and motivating thing. And I think that it's something that we should be doing for ourselves as much as we should be doing for other people, right? Our responsibility for our own well-being is no less than our responsibility for other people's well-being. Halachically, we have to look after ourselves before others. And 100%, I think that, I don't want to oversimplify it and say that someone who never got that and feels like they're struggling because of it should just start doing that and rely on that, and maybe look for some help, to compensate. Sorry? I mean, it depends. They may or may not. But yes, I'm not saying that is, if a person didn't get that from outside, this is what they should do. If a person didn't get any of that from outside and they're struggling as a result, they should speak to someone and get help to work on building that up. A big part of that might be the process of learning to do that for themselves. right? Because like you said, if they don't, first of all, they may not believe it enough, and they need to be enlightened and to realize and appreciate, hang on, this really is true. It's not just some fairy tale that I'm convincing myself to make myself feel good. It's real, and to appreciate that. And to then also, I mean, it's a skill to do it, like everything. First of all, to remember to do it, and then to actually go through the process. Any kind of thinking is a skill. You know, most of it we've learned so long ago that we don't even realize we're doing it anymore, but it's a skill that we've learned. And this is also a skill. And, you know, depending on how big the deficit is and how much progress someone needs to make, they might need help to learn how to do it. They might be able to just, you know, do it on their own. It depends. But 100% it's something that we can and should be doing. And then, of course, like in every situation, there are people who don't need any help and maybe could do a little bit less self-validating in terms of their achievements, but you know, just for the sake of lightening things up a little. But, you know, the positive feedback is when we have both, that's when we get the most wholesome possible experience. Now, imagine if we're going to be missing one or the other. Imagine someone that didn't really get positive feedback for their achievements, but they did get a strong sense of self-worth and value and security in the fact that they matter and they're worthwhile and they need to be here and you know, and their existence matters. If someone got that foundation, they're probably going to be 90% of the way there to being able to get, you know, to develop the skill, because they'll be set up to succeed in terms of appreciating the value of their achievements, and their self-image is going to be relatively positive and wholesome. It's likely they'll be able to work on those things. If someone's missing that foundation and then they have to work on the self-validation, or they got the validation for those things, in some ways that might even be worse because they have this imbalance. If someone's missing both, I mean, it's a horrible place to be, but at least they're going to know, I need to do something about this and get help and fix it. If someone has that validation from the achievements and the work and nothing on the foundation and the inside, and they might feel like, yeah, do this, there's a rewarding achievement, they could end up much worse off down the line. So what's worse? I don't know, whatever. But ultimately, the same way that water is not colorful, it doesn't have flavor, it's not exciting, it's got no drama. And if you have it, chances are, you know, Baruch Hashem, we are so blessed to live in a time and a place where there's no shortage of drinking water. I bet that all of us take the availability of drinking water for granted almost all the time. For those who don't drink outside of Sukkah, I mean, Yom Kippur, right? There you go. On Yom Kippur, I'm sure we all appreciate the value of water more than an average day. But Baruch Hashem, we're very lucky to live in a place where we can. And my guess is most likely all of us do take for granted the existence of the access to drinking water most of the time. So we don't think about it. If we have it, if you have it, there's no shortage. You don't think about it. It's not exciting. It's not colorful. It's not tasty. It's super lame. There's nothing interesting about it, except for the fact that if we didn't have it, we'd be dead very quickly and wouldn't eat anything else. But if there's no deficit, we take it for granted. A person who has this healthy appreciation and awareness of who they are and the fact that they matter and they're worthwhile, period, end of sentence. If that's something that they always had, something that they were nurtured with and raised with, and not something they had to work on and develop themselves, they may very likely take it for granted and have no appreciation and awareness of the fact that if someone's missing that, the deficit it creates in their life can be devastating. Exactly the same as water, right? It's just, yes, we matter, and you know what? We all matter for the exact same reason, the same way that every bottle of water is the same and every cup of water is the same. Every essence of the soul is the same because it's all just the same one, Hashem. It's like, that's not exciting. There's no variation. There's nothing specific. We're not talking about once there's seichel and midas and spirits and before any of that. It's just like absolute infinity that you can't describe and you can't define and you can't measure and you can't say anything about without being wrong, because anything you say by definition is describing, which means it's describing it as something and not something else, which means you're wrong. Basically, you can't even talk about it. It's like, that's lame. It's not exciting. You can't even have a conversation. The essence of the soul deep down, which is where the ultimate value lies. The same way that water, which is lame and boring, is the most important thing, the thing that's going to bring the most value to life out of it. That's what water is about. Question? Why would what make a person feel good about themselves? It's not exciting, but it's Hashem. It's absolute infinity. Now, it's true that it does take some work to develop, and to be able to think abstractly enough to realize, yeah, the reason that this is valuable is not because of what it can do or any of its characteristics. It's because it's absolutely infinite, which ironically, at the same time, makes it unexciting because there are no unique characteristics, but that's also the thing that makes it infinitely valuable. It is absolute infinity. There's nothing that's more than that. Same as water. Nothing exciting, super lame if you have it, but it's the thing that's going to bring the most value to a person if they don't have it. And if they have it, it brought them the most value, and because they have that value, they don't even think about it. And that's that appreciation for who we are deepest down. We're all the same. It's not exciting, but that's the greatest source of well-being. Now, a person can have everything else. A person can have all the good things we talked about at the beginning. Everything that's in tier 2 of sources of joy. A person can have experienced every source of joy on planet Earth, but if they don't have an appreciation for the value that they have as an individual, if we don't realize and appreciate who we are and what we have inside of us, we're going to be missing out on the one and only thing that is a tier 1 source of joy, the thing that will give us a joy and a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction and reward unlike any other and unlike everything else combined, right? Because Chazal don't say, if there is no joy like Simchas Beis Sheva, they say, if you haven't seen that, you haven't seen joy, which means if you haven't seen that and you have seen everything else, you still haven't seen joy. So that's greater than everything else combined. And all the achievements and all the parties and all the nice things and all the simchas and everything, if a person doesn't realize and appreciate who we are inside, all of that's built on an empty space without a foundation. And that the number 1 source of joy is the drawing of the joy. The greatest sense of joy and well-being that exists in the world is that appreciation for the fact that we have absolute infinity inside of us, and we matter, and we're worthwhile, and we make a difference, and we're valuable, period, end discussion. That's what water is. It depends what you define as we. It could be both. It depends how you talk about it. Because on one hand, we say in Berachas HaShachar, neshama shenosata, be the neshama that you put in. Right? We're talking with our mouth. We're talking with our nefesh habahamis. Inside the body is the nefesh habahamis. Inside the nefesh habahamis is the nefesh habahamis. Right. That being said, in truth, that soul that is in the us, that is the conscious experience, right? So the conscious experience is primarily the person, the body, the brain, the mind, the nefesh habahamis. That together makes a person, which is a conscious experience, and that's what we experience. So the conscious experience, the person who's having that conscious experience is saying the soul that you put in. But ultimately, our truest identity is the nefesh kiss. That's really what we are deepest down. So it depends at which level of being we're talking about. If we're talking at the level of conscious experience, then we are the person and the soul is in us. The nefesh kiss is in us. If we're talking at the level of really who we are and why we're here and what it's all about and the origin and the motivation for the whole process of creation and everything else, it's the nefesh kiss. That's really who we are. So ultimately, that is who we are. Who we are most deep down and most truly at the end of peeling away all the layers is absolute infinity. And that's the thing that will bring us a sense of self-worth and joy and fulfillment and well-being, unlike everything else combined. That's why they said if you haven't celebrated the drawing of the water, you haven't seen true joy. And that's the message of Sukkot, is really, and this is why it comes after the because just a quick, I don't think I've told this. No, we'll do an abbreviated version. It's a regional little town, like a real little town, somewhere in North Dakota, where like the whole town is like, a handful of families. The whole school has like a few dozen kids. And in that school, there was like one Jewish kid whose family was traditional and one Catholic kid whose family was also traditional. And they were the only two religious kids in the whole school. And so they kind of stuck together. It's true that the religions are, have a lot in common to a degree, but are very different. I mean, according to Yiddishkeit, Catholicism is Avodah Zarah, so like that's pretty different. The bottom line is there are a lot of core values that they shared, and they ended up, being really good friends and developing a deep friendship. And as they went through school and matured and came out and, continued after school, they became closer and closer and closer friends. And the kid who was in the traditional Jewish home ended up going to, further his Jewish education, actually became pretty serious and became a rabbi. And the Catholic kid also did the same thing and ended up becoming more serious about his religion and became a Catholic priest. Anyways, and they, after all their journeys, they came back to the town, and he was the rabbi in the town for like, I guess, whatever. And there was one rabbi and one priest in this town, and one day the priest, and they were really tight friends still, and the priest calls up the rabbi and sends him a WhatsApp, whatever, DM, and he says, listen, I need you a huge favor. This is going to sound weird, and you're going to want to say no, you're going to resist. I'm telling you, but please, I'm desperate. It's not a big deal in reality. I'm double booked tonight. I have my cousin's wedding. I can't miss it. And I have confessions. I have to do confessions tonight. If I'm not at the wedding, I'm in big trouble. If you sub for me at confessions, no one's going to know the difference. They're not going to see anyways. So could you just do the confessions for me? And the rabbi's like, what about rabbi? We don't do confessions. I don't know anything about confessions. I'm not doing confessions. He says, please, trust me. I'm telling you, you're a rabbi. This is nothing compared to what you've done. This is a piece of cake. It's the easiest part of clergy. You come. It starts at 8 o'clock. I could be there till 8:10, and then I got to run. Come in. We'll squeeze in the booth together. No one's going to know. You'll observe the first 10 minutes. I'll do a few. You'll watch, and then I'll duck out, and you'll keep going. No one's going to know the difference. It'll be fine. Please, like I don't have a way out. I'm desperate. Rabbi says, you know what? For you, I'll do it one time. Don't ask me again. So it comes 8 o'clock, and squeeze the booth together. And the first person comes along and says, I did 10 sins this week. He's confessing his 10 sins. The priest says you did 10 sins this week, give $5 to charity and be forgiven. The rabbi's taking notes, and the next person comes and says, I did 6 sins this week, confesses the 6 sins. The priest says, 6 sins, give $3 to charity and you'll be forgiven. And the next person comes and confesses their 4 sins, says you did 4 sins this week, $2 to charity and you'll be forgiven. And then the rabbi's taking notes the whole time, and then the priest says, listen, I gotta run, you're a piece of cake, you got this. So the priest runs off, and the rabbi's sitting there and is like, stroking his beard, and is a little bit nervous. And then someone comes past and confesses that they did a sin this week. The rabbi says, how many? 1 sin? Yeah. It's like 10 sins, $5. 6 sins, $3. 4 sins, $2. It's like, this week's 2 for $1. Go do another one and come back. Right? And the joke, I mean, obviously, part of the joke here is like, or part of what, that I think the subtext of what creates the urge that makes us laugh so hard about this is like this whole thing of confession, of forgiveness, of like, well, what does that mean? Like, do Averos matter or do they not matter? Simple question. Is it a game? And like the whole you are like, don't do Averos, it's going to make a difference, and it's going to affect the difference of Hashem, and it's going to upset Hashem, and it's going to affect that Hashem, and it's going to affect that connection with Hashem. All of that's going to be really bad if we do an Aver and if we don't do a mitzvah. All of that's real. And then Yom Kippur comes, it's like, it's all good. Start again, clean slate, doesn't matter. It's like, does it matter or not? Is it a game? Is it not a game? Like, make up your mind. Like we're not in first grade. And the what it boils down to is there's the idea. It comes. It's kind of a play on words, because halachically there's something called atzmei shoyim mechaper. That's the way that the nekudas are generally halachic svarim, but in Chassidus it talks about itzumei shoyim. Atzmei shoyim becomes itzumei shoyim mechaper, the essence of the day atonement, which means there's something about the time that Yom Kippur was made out of, something about the nature of time during those 25 hours, that somehow makes these averos and the damage that was real go away. And what that is who are we deepest down inside? Part of Hashem. Can Hashem be damaged? No, Hashem can't be damaged. Hashem can't be hurt. Can't do anything bad to Hashem. Can't injure Hashem, damage Hashem. So if that's who we are deep down inside, it's just that that's who we are deep, deep, deep down under many, many, many layers behind the scenes. And the way that it works is that's behind the scenes. But the parts of our neshama that we're experiencing and we're operating with and that are functioning primarily on a daily basis, those can get hurt, those can get damaged, those can have their connection to Hashem messed up and severed and broken, at least partially. What happens on Yom Kippur is the thing that Yom Kippur does is it's kind of like, and I know this, but for those of you who are not like deeply familiar, might not be much, but in case anyone is, it's kind of like the stem cell therapy of the soul. It's taking that part of us that's absolutely infinite, that is the source behind everything and everyone that we are, that cannot be damaged. And it's taking that, it's like hypothetical stem cells therapy. If there was a way that we could take stem cells and just make them course through our veins and just find anything damaged and just replenish the damage, if we could manage and control stem cells in that way, we'd be immortal, because there's nothing that couldn't hypothetically be fixed and repaired by stem cells, because everything came from that. We started off as one stem cell, and every cell in our body came from that. If we could figure out a way to make that just saturate and travel around and just fill every place that's damaged, any damage could be repaired. That's what Yom Kippur is. It takes that essence of who we are, that's infinite, that is Hashem. It's a spark of Hashem. And it's usually behind the scenes on Yom Kippur. It comes out and it circulates through every layer of our soul, through every layer of who we are and what we are. If that happens, like, there's no damage. It's Hashem. It's absolute infinity. Hashem can't be damaged. The thing that sometimes throws people off is that halachically it says, in order to get atonement on Yom Kippur, we have to do teshuvah first. That's not because the teshuvah is affecting the atonement. That's because the way it works is that there's a switch you have to flick, or a button you have to press as a prerequisite that will allow the effect of it, that will allow the power of Yom Kippur to go into effect. So we have to do teshuvah. The teshuvah that we do allows Yom Kippur to go into effect. That effect that then happens is the absolute infinity that's ultimately who and what we really are, saturates every layer of who and what we are. And in the face of that, there is no damage. And that's how everything goes away. Now, if what Yom Kippur is about is that absolute infinity, that's who and what we really are, and that coursing through every part, every layer of our identity and our experience of who and what we are, and saturating everything, permeating everything, and making everything whole. And then the thing that follows right on the tail end of that is Sukkos. It makes sense that on Sukkos, it's like, hey, hang on, absolute infinity in here. That's something to celebrate. That's something worth dancing about all night. And that's why the Simchas Beis HaSheva, the celebrating the water, that thing that's not specific, it's not exciting, no color, no flavor, kind of lame. If you have it, that appreciation for that. If you have it, probably take it for granted and can focus just on the flavors and the achievements and all of those things. That is what we celebrate on Sukkot right after Yom Kippur, because that's the aftermath of Yom Kippur. On Yom Kippur, that absolute infinity that we have buried deep down isn't buried deep down. It's the theme of the day, and it saturates every part of who and what we are. What happens on the tail end of that? It's like, whoa, this is something to celebrate. Absolute infinity. Drawing the water, the thing of greatest value, the source of greatest joy and fulfillment and well-being, which is also the least exciting because it's not unique and it doesn't have any specific characteristics. It's kind of lame and boring because it's absolute infinity. At the same time as absolute infinity can be lame and boring, no drama, no excitement, it's also absolutely infinite. So that's Sukkot. And I would say that if the only thing we take from that is that we spend the next 20 odd hours, the remainder of Sukkot, really just being present and appreciating the fact that, you know what? Every one of us, you, me, has the absolute infinity of Hashem inside of us. And not only is it inside of us, that's actually the ultimate truth of who and what we are. And that's something that can never be taken away. And as long as we are breathing, we have that absolute infinity inside of us. And that defines us. And the depth of the self-worth that can give us, it could be really novel, even if we've known it, we never thought about it in that way before. It can be something that, the whole Tishrei could be worth it just for a day of really trying to be present in that idea and embrace it and experience it as presently as we can for a day. super quickly because, as usual, I'm out of time before I'm done. Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. There's a mashal in a medrash that talks about what Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah is. It says that on Sukkos we say the whole Hallel every day, unlike Pesach. Pesach is the same korbanos every day. Sukkos is different korbanos every day, right? Over the course of Sukkos, we bring 70 korbanos for the 70 nations, 70 non-nations other than the Jews, and they're divided up. So each day it's a different number of sacrifices, and because each day it's a different korban, so each day it's a novel korban. We haven't brought this number of korbanos yet this year, so we say the whole Hallel. It's very exciting. Pesach, same korbanos every day. So after the first days, we say half. Not as exciting as that. So Sukkot is really about us. It's about us, elevating everything about everyone in the world who's not Jewish in the Beis Hamikdash through korbanos. It's something that's really profound and powerful, and it's something that we celebrate. Then it comes the end of Sukkot, and Hashem says, look, the mashal is, someone, a king, let's say, makes a party, and everyone's invited to the party, the whole city, the whole town, the whole country, everyone can come, massive. And then after like a week of this party, the king turns around to like his couple of best friends or closest, friends, family, whatever, and says, you know what, like we've had this party like with everyone, and it's been really fun and really nice, but like they're gone. Now let's spend a day like just us celebrating what we have together. And so that's part of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. Another part of it is, or another mashal, there are a couple of mashalim, another mashal that's given is, that Hashem says, we've been celebrating for a whole week. We've had this week of celebration. Hashem and the Jews, we've been celebrating. Now, and the words in the mashal are, Kosha alai pridaschem, your separation is difficult for me. I don't want you to separate, so it's difficult for us to be parted. So let's have one more day together. It's like in a way that's like a little bit childish. It's like, I don't want to separate, so let's delay it for a day. What did that achieve? It means that now we have to separate after 8 days of separation, of being together instead of 7. You just made it harder, not easier. Like, how is that solving? It's your separation is difficult for me, so let's push it off for a day. Didn't help. And so the Rebbe points out, it doesn't say Kosha alai pridasei, no, our separation is difficult. It says Kosha alai pridaschem, your separation is difficult. Sukkot is, right, the message of unity. The sukkah, we're all in the sukkah together. The sukkah unites us. We're all equal and one as far as the sukkah is concerned. Sukkah doesn't care if there's one of us or all of us here. Same difference. We're all one as far as the sukkah is concerned. Another angle of the oneness of sukkah is the lulav. We have the lulav and the hadassim and the aravas and the esrog, and each represents different things, right? We have the Talmud Chacham, the one who does mitzvahs, both, and the neither, and it brings it all together. That's all nice and fine. But you know what? When you put the lulav and esrog down tomorrow night, and there's no more lulav holding us together, we're just all different again, and there's no lulav holding us together. So where's that unity? We're not all eating in the sukkah together next week. So the unity of the sukkah is gone. The unity of the lulav is gone. It doesn't say our separation is difficult. The Medrash says your separation is difficult. Hashem says, I have been here and seen the oneness and the unity among my children, and there's nothing more gratifying for Hashem as the parent than our unity together. And Hashem says, now it's over, no more sukkah. I don't want you guys to separate from each other and for this achdus to be. That was Hashem's plan. And what happens on Shmini Atzeres is the korban musaf of Shmini Atzeres, if you pay attention to musaf, when we daven musaf, right? Musaf, tefillas musaf, the prayer of musaf represents the musaf sacrifice, the additional sacrifice on every Yom Tov, basically. So it's the Tamid every day of the year, and all the other korbanos. On Shabbos, there's a specific additional Shabbos sacrifice, a korban musaf additional. So on Shabbos, we have a davening, a musaf davening, where we read the psukim in the Torah about that korban. And each day of Yom Tov, that's why in musaf for Yom Tov, right, there's like 2 pages of like a whole bunch of options, depending on where you are. Because depending on what the korbanos of that day are, you would read the psukim from the Torah that describe the korbanos of that day. The musaf korban of that day is what we're commemorating with the musaf prayer of that day. The musaf korban of Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah is par echad ayil echad, 1. Every other day, it's 7 of this, the different numbers of things, 1, 2, and 7. Here it's 1. The message of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah is Yom Kippur, Sukkot. The message behind Sukkot was the drawing of the water, that valuing who you are infinitely. But we also had, on top of that, we had the unity of the Sukkah bringing us together despite our differences. The unity of the Dalamini bringing us together despite our differences. Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah is 1 animal. The korban is emphasizing. Hashem said on Sukkot, it was hard for me to see you separate. at the end of Sukkot. Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, we're going to focus on that thing where you are all one. It's not that you've come together despite your differences because something brought you together. You are one. The essence of who you are, the absolute infinity that you have inside is identical. I'm valuable because I have absolute infinity inside of me, and every one of you is the same. There can't be variations in absolute infinity, or it's not absolutely infinite because they're different, which means they can be described and defined differently. Absolute infinity, there can only be one instance of it, and it's identical. It's that one. We all one. We are all the same. And after the Yom Kippur, and then the drawing on that, the Beis HaShoeva, the drawing of that water, that thing that's lame and unexciting and no uniqueness, but the most profound source of well-being and joy, just like water has those ironic opposites. Drawing that out of whole sukkah, we get to Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, where it's like, yes, now we're ready to really double down on the oneness. That's why we're celebrating the Torah. We don't celebrate it by learning, because we all learn differently. We all experience differently, think differently, understand differently. We can all dance the same. We can all participate in joy and dancing the same. So that's the way that we can relate this, because this is the one karma. It's the oneness. It's the oneness that every one of us has that we've been drawing out on all week, drawing that water out. We get to Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah after a week long of drawing that out. That's the place we get to, is it's about the oneness. And that's why Hashem said, Hashem's not pushing it off. I don't want you to separate. Let's delay it a day, which didn't help except delay. Hashem's like, I don't want you to separate. So instead of having things holding you together, let's get to the place where you really are one. And at that point, there doesn't have to be separation, because we are all one. And once we get there and we connect to that and are present in that, then we can go about our different activities and different paths and different characteristics and strengths and weaknesses and journeys. And we're still all one, because those things are all on top of the thing that's truly who we are, at which point we are one. And that's Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, is the oneness that we have. We are all one, and we cannot be separated or differentiated. The oneness of Hashem and the oneness of us with Hashem, because our oneness is the oneness of Hashem. That's where it comes from. That's why we are one. So Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah is doubling down on that, the oneness of absolute infinity, because absolute infinity can only be one by definition. We had Yom Kippur, we spent Sukkot a week drawing that out, that awareness of that, clarity in that. Getting to Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, it's like take that and really focus in and double down on the oneness that we have individually, that we have together, the absolute infinity that makes us one, that is Hashem, and that makes us and Hashem one, and the Torah one, because that absolute infinity is also the true identity of Torah. And that's the celebration of Shmini Atzeres and Torah. And that's why that's an answer to the problem. Because once we access that and experience that presently and really appreciate that, connect to it, we're one forever. We don't need anything to hold us together anymore. You can take away all the things that are holding us together. We're one by definition. Sorry to have stolen a bit of extra time. L'chaim, good Yom Tov. A good Kvittel. Tonight is Shmini Atzeres, is the very, very tail end of Yom Kippur also. And L'chaim, that we should all of us, wherever we are around the world, everyone should have a good year. Simply put, without explanations and without having to interpret and anything else, everyone should just have a year that's good and sweet, and it's truly good and it tastes good, and without grief and without sadness, and just Higi Azman, the time has come that life should be good. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy to take questions.
Need the questions right?
No, I didn't. I mean, we had some questions, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. There's an idea, like I've been learning about emotional conflict, how it helps in relationships, like relying yourself, not be needing other people. Is that related to what we're saying about bottom layer?
I think it is, because it's not that, see, that being able to feel secure and healthy in ourselves shouldn't be, and for some people it might, and for some people it does, let's say, in some cases it does, but it shouldn't, and it definitely doesn't need to take away from that, the complexity and the beauty of the connection in the relationship. If it's done right, it's only going to add, because it means that we feel safe and complete and whole to start with, which puts us in a position to succeed and to connect and to share and to give and to take in a way that's constructive and that's not trying to take to fill a gap, which is going to make us needy, and it's going to upset the balance, and it's going to mean that there's an ulterior motive behind the give and take rather than just being in a relationship, right? So if both parties in a relationship feel secure and whole, that's only going to set them up to be giving and taking and sharing more, not less. Now, it could be that, part of the process of getting to a place where we're going to be able to really give and take and share properly might need us to focus on becoming whole ourselves first so that we can get there. But the point of it is not to take away from sharing. It's to put us in a position to be able to share most effectively, most completely. Yeah. And so you the person who's whole and healthy is able to give, because there aren't other things that are missing that are pulling and distracting, introducing ulterior motives to the giving and sharing, which are ultimately going to be there, whether, not as a matter of judgment or blame. The fact is, if there are things missing inside of a person, that's going to introduce artifacts into their giving and their sharing. It's a matter of fact. Is there a question here? Sure is. It wouldn't be living Chassidus without a selfie, would it? I've known that for a while.
Thank you. But I also want to announce that I made a mistake. Both documents got names. Esther Citron, Callie Aronson, Naomi Schlafer, Attila Fine, Russell Durkin, Russell Girl, and Batia Thank you. Those are the people I missed. And everybody else, I'll say it again. Ariel Zuckerman, thank you, Space. Hello. Shelby Aronson, Gila Dia, Tanya Albuquerque, Stebbins, Michael, Miller, Kaya Matasab, Columbus Hayes, Food Iceberg, and Rocco Ellinger. They all earned the limited student umbrella.
It's a good question. I guess
Everyone is welcome.
we're supposed to be learning this regularly, which should be giving. Right now, even if a person has that, even if a person means well and is really trying to push themselves, like how hard do you push yourself? Like, we all have that left which we're actually going to push ourselves. And it's like, no, more. But that's not, I don't think the point of that is at all to take away from that. It's just that if a person's learning to sit straight, just basics of Tanya, they're going to be built. I'm speculating because it's a good question, and I don't know that I can give a specific answer. I can't say that this is the reason for ever focus on that after that, but to me that makes sense as a resolution to the question. Are there any more questions about the fact that we see that the Rebbe would often just encourage people, push people to do, and you see a lot more of that than you see of the Rebbe at dollars and things telling people about, or in Yechidus. But I mean, in Yechidus, I'm sure a lot of the other part of it happens, just we don't necessarily hear about it. At dollars, and when people would come by, you see the Rebbe pushing, do more. You don't always hear the Rebbe focusing on that, sense of wholeness and self-worth and validity. And so what I was saying was that if we're learning Chassidus, we're learning the basics of Tanya, that's something that should be developing as a result. When it comes to how hard are we supposed to push ourselves, we all have that extent to which we're going to naturally push ourselves. The Rebbe saying, but more. It's not something that's necessarily specifically associated with Simchas, as far as I'm aware. That tends to be more associated with like Elul and Rosh Hashanah. But it's definitely a time of grace. There's a lot happening spiritually. And, if a person's like got something that they think about, maybe I should be doing that. That's a very good time to make it. It's just, I wouldn't say that going into Shmini Atzeret, so it's like, okay, like what hot am I going to make? I need to make a hot. It's not like a time that you specifically should should feel a burden of trying to come up with a haflata. If there's a haflata, a person feels like maybe it's a very opportune time to make it. Say for a mitzvah. I mean, suggestions of haflatas becomes very individual. There are so many things. Maybe spending 5 minutes more davening, 5 minutes more just thinking about before we go to bed, before we say Shema at night. Like, what are my real values? What do I really want out of life? What could I do tomorrow to make tomorrow just a little bit more of that? Is an idea that comes to mind. There are a lot of options. We could do a confession and we can come up with a whole list. But that's helpful. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Sorry to keep you.
No, you're all
And
good.
we
Thank you
will
so much.
do it again sometime.
Yes, Hashem. Thank you.